Welcome to the Innovation Brief by IdeaScale, the podcast for leaders just like you guys who are ready to transform their teams into innovation powerhouses. We all know the pressure to innovate, but what if I told you it's not about chasing the next shiny object? What if it's about choosing the right approach? So today, we're going to unpack 4 distinct types of innovation to help you tackle those big challenges strategically and effectively.
What's so fascinating about innovation is it's not a one-size-fits-all process. It's like a builder using different tools for different tasks. Sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a screwdriver, and the same principle applies to innovation.
Okay, let's unpack this toolbox then. I'm already intrigued.
Yes.
So where do we even begin?
Well, many people are surprised to learn that even the most groundbreaking innovations often have roots in something very fundamental, basic research.
Basic research.
Yeah.
That sounds, well, a little too basic for disruptive innovation, doesn't it?
And that's where the magic lies. You see, think of basic research as exploring the unknown. It might not have an immediate application, but it's about uncovering those fundamental principles that can later fuel those aha moments. For example, you know how touchscreens are everywhere now? Well, the technology behind that wasn't initially developed for smartphones. It came from years of basic research exploring the properties of different materials and how they interact with electrical currents.
Wow, I never realized the connection there. That really flips the script on how we usually think about innovation. So how can our listeners, CEOs, and innovation leaders tap into this? Not everyone has a research lab in their basement, right?
Right. You don't need your own lab to harness the power of basic research. Look for opportunities to partner with universities or research institutions. Explore government programs that fund research in areas that are relevant to your industry. You might be surprised by the hidden gems that you uncover.
That's a fantastic point. It's about connecting with the sources of those fundamental breakthroughs. Okay, so we've got basic research as our foundation. What's the next tool in our innovation toolbox?
Well, let's move from the foundational to the targeted breakthrough innovation. And this is where we have a clearly defined problem, but the solution path is unknown. We need to venture outside the familiar, maybe even beyond our industry to find that answer.
Can you give us a real-world example of this, something our listeners can relate to?
Absolutely. Imagine you're leading a company that is focused on developing sustainable building materials. Traditional concrete production has a massive environmental impact. So you have a well-defined problem. But the solution might not come from the usual suspects in the construction industry. Breakthrough innovation might involve looking at biomimicry, how nature builds strong and lightweight structures, and then partnering with biologists or material scientists to develop concrete alternatives that are inspired by seashells or spider silk.
That's such a powerful illustration.
Yeah.
It reminds us that the answer might be hiding in plain sight, but in a completely different field.
Precisely. Sometimes the most innovative solutions come from cross-pollinating ideas from seemingly unrelated disciplines.
This is where it gets really interesting. So we've gone from the foundational to the targeted. What about the type of innovation that's all about making what we already have even better?
Ah, yes, sustaining innovation. The bread and butter for many businesses. This is about optimizing existing products, processes, or business models to stay competitive and relevant in the market. And it's driven by techniques like brainstorming, design thinking, and strategic acquisitions.
This feels familiar. It's what many of us do on a daily basis. But can you give us an example of a company that's truly mastering this?
Think about the evolution of electric vehicles. Tesla didn't just launch a disruptive product. They've been constantly innovating, improving battery range, charging infrastructure, and even the user interface of their vehicles. Each iteration builds on the previous one, responding to customer feedback and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. It's a masterclass in sustaining innovation.
That's a great example. It shows that staying ahead isn't always about reinventing the wheel. Sometimes it's about making the wheel spin faster, longer, and more efficiently. Okay, so we've got basic research, breakthrough innovation, and sustaining innovation. What's the final tool in our innovation arsenal?
Well, this one has the power to redefine entire industries. Disruptive innovation. It's the type of innovation that addresses an undefined problem, a pain point that perhaps customers haven't even articulated yet. It's about creating a solution that completely changes the game.
Okay, that sounds exciting, but also a bit intimidating. Can you give us a classic example of disruptive innovation to bring this concept to life?
Think back to the early days of digital photography. People were happy enough with film cameras, but there were underlying frustrations. The cost of film, the way to develop pictures, the limitations of physical prints. Then came companies like Kodak and Canon offering the first digital cameras. They weren't just better film cameras, they were a completely different approach to capturing and sharing images.
So disruptive innovation isn't just about making a better mousetrap. It's about creating a whole new way to catch mice even if people haven't realized they need a new way yet.
That's a great way to put it. Disruptive innovators often see a future that others haven't imagined yet, and they create the path to get there.
This is incredible. We've got these four powerful tools: basic research, breakthrough innovation, sustaining innovation, and disruptive innovation. It sounds like the key is knowing which tool to use for which challenge. But how do we do that? How do we choose the right approach?
Well, that's the crucial question, isn't it? Just like a surgeon wouldn't use a scalpel for every procedure, innovation leaders need to carefully select the right tool for each situation. And it starts with understanding your goals and the specific challenge you're facing.
So if I'm sitting here as a CEO or a chief innovation officer, where do I even begin to figure that out?
I always recommend starting with a few key questions. First, how well defined is the problem you're trying to solve? Is it a known issue with clear root causes, or is it more nebulous, something you're struggling to even articulate?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like diagnosing the problem before prescribing the solution. What's the next question we should ask ourselves?
Well, think about the skill sets needed to address this problem. Do you have the expertise in-house, or does it require tapping into external knowledge or partnerships?
Okay, I can see how that would influence our approach. So if we have a well-defined problem and the necessary skills, we're probably looking at sustaining innovation, right? We're making those incremental improvements to what we already have.
Exactly. You're optimizing and refining your existing offerings to stay ahead of the competition. But what if you have a well-defined problem, but the solution requires skills or knowledge you don't currently possess? That's a strong indicator that breakthrough innovation might be the right approach. It's about venturing beyond your usual circle of expertise and looking for inspiration in those unexpected places.
That's a great way to think about it. It's like knowing when to call in a specialist for a specific problem.
Now, things get really interesting when the problem itself is poorly defined. This is where disruptive innovation often comes into play.
I can see why that would be the case. But how do you even begin to tackle a problem that's hard to define in the first place?
Yeah.
It feels like trying to hit a moving target in the dark.
It requires a different mindset. It's about being deeply attuned to the frustrations and unmet needs in the market, even if people can't articulate them clearly. Think about the early days of online streaming. People weren't necessarily complaining about having to go to the video store, but there was an underlying frustration with the limitations of physical media and fixed viewing schedules. Companies like Netflix recognized that unarticulated need and created a solution that completely revolutionized the way we consume entertainment.
That's a fantastic example. It highlights the importance of looking beyond what people are saying and understanding the deeper needs they might not even be aware of themselves.
It's about connecting the dots between emerging needs and existing capabilities, even if those capabilities come from outside your industry.
So to recap, we've explored these four distinct types of innovation. Basic research lays the groundwork. Breakthrough innovation tackles well-defined problems with unknown solutions. Sustaining innovation optimizes what exists, and disruptive innovation addresses those undefined problems with potential to reshape entire industries.
And the key takeaway here is that successful organizations don't limit themselves to just one approach. They build a diverse portfolio of innovation strategies, adapting their toolkit to the specific challenges they face. It's about being agile, experimental, and always open to exploring those new possibilities.
That's so important for our listeners to hear. It's not about picking one and sticking with it. It's about being flexible and adaptable in your approach to innovation.
Precisely. It's about fostering a culture of curiosity, collaboration, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
So how do we actually do that? How do we build that kind of innovative culture within our organizations? How do we move beyond the theory and put these principles into action? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Like, how do we cultivate that innovative spirit within our teams? I mean, it's one thing to talk about these different approaches, but actually like putting them into practice. Building that culture of innovation, that's where the real magic happens, right?
You hit the nail on the head. It's not about a magic formula, but rather about intentional steps and a commitment from leadership. Leaders need to champion innovation not just with their words, but through their actions. They need to create spaces where experimentation is encouraged, where failure is seen as a learning opportunity and not a career killer.
Yeah, I think that psychological safety is so crucial. If people are afraid to take risks, they'll never push those boundaries. They'll never stumble upon those groundbreaking discoveries.
Absolutely. And it's not just about tolerating failure, it's about celebrating the lessons learned. It's about fostering an environment where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas, no matter how unconventional they might seem.
So we need that leadership buy-in, that psychological safety. What else can we do to create this fertile ground for innovation?
Well, think about the structures you have in place. Do your teams have dedicated time and resources for innovation? Are there processes for capturing and evaluating ideas so they don't just, disappear into the ether? Tools like IdeaScale can be incredibly powerful for fostering collaboration and turning those sparks of inspiration into concrete action plans.
It sounds like it's about creating a system, a framework that actually supports innovation, rather than just hoping it will magically happen on its own.
Precisely. And don't underestimate the power of cross-functional collaboration. Bringing people together from different departments with diverse perspectives and skill sets can lead to truly innovative solutions. When you break down those silos, you create a space where ideas can collide and combine in unexpected ways.
It's like that saying, none of us is as smart as all of us. We get so stuck in our own little world sometimes. It's amazing what can emerge when we step outside of them and connect with others who bring, different perspectives to the table.
And finally, remember that innovation is a journey, not a destination. It's about fostering a mindset of continuous learning adaptability and a willingness to embrace change. The landscape is constantly shifting, so we need to be prepared to adjust our course, to experiment, and to learn from our experiences, both the successes and the failures.
I love that. A journey, not a destination. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of strategic innovation, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What's that one nugget of wisdom they can take back to their teams and start putting into practice today?
The power to innovate is within everyone's reach. It's not about waiting for that one brilliant idea. It's about understanding these different types of innovation, choosing the right approach for the challenge at hand, and creating a culture that empowers people to bring those ideas to life. Remember, innovation isn't some mystical force. It's a skill that can be developed, nurtured, and strategically deployed.
Beautifully said. It's about empowering your team to become innovators, to see the world through a lens of possibility, and to have the tools and the support to turn those possibilities into realities. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of strategic innovation. We hope you found this episode valuable. Remember, turn your work team into innovators. If you're ready to empower your teams to innovate effectively, head over to IdeaScale.com and book a demo for a free trial. New episodes of the Innovation Brief air every Tuesday and Friday. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a comment below, letting us know what you think of the show and what topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes. Thanks for listening.